Hey everybody, I hope you're all doing well. As we always say at the beginning of these live Q&A sessions, like, subscribe, you'll know when we're doing these. Then we can try to answer some of your questions about what's going on in Washington, D.C. or the community. That's enough formalities. I want to get into a couple of formal issues right now. One being the debt ceiling, the debt limit spending, and the other one being a Coast Guard hearing that we had yesterday, and then get to some questions. So let's just start. They always say in the military, make the big deal the big deal. So let's make the big deal the debt limit, what's going on with that. I believe that I was in a couple of meetings just now. I had Ukrainian parliament members in the office, and I had mortgage bankers in the office and a few others. So I didn't actually get to see if they released it, but I heard that the Speaker's office released their proposal for what they were looking at for some level of negotiations with the debt limit. Now, when you look at what's going on with the debt limit, you look at treasuries that everybody wants from the United States of America, other countries, you name it, people in the United States of America. You look at our debt and you look at that and you say, are we going to default on that? What does that do to our standing in the globe? What does it do to the value of our currency? The full faith and credit of the US dollar, the list goes on and on. Those are very real conversations in anybody's world, no matter what it is that you do. Now, in order to raise the debt limit and pay our bills, in order to do that, we are saying, listen, this is an important point of negotiation right here, because our country is spending way too much. And if Joe Biden, if your administration is not going to work on cutting spending, because if you don't work on it right now, there's not really another real opportunity to have negotiations with you where there's leverage that you will actually change and do good policies, then you're not going to be able to raise that debt limit. It originates in the House of Representatives, and it will not happen without cuts. So let's talk about some of the cuts that are going on. I have a list of some of them in front of me, and I can give you some details. And again, just if you have questions on these cuts, if you have questions on Coast Guard, if you have questions on something else going on in Washington, in the world, type it. We'll try to answer your questions, and we'll try to get you, what it is that's actually happening with that, so that you hear from up here. So some of the cuts, some of the things that's going on. Every bit of budgeting in Washington, D.C. goes on 10-year windows. So what you're looking at with this, you're looking at a 10-year window. Here's one of the places. Just by cutting discretionary spending, which is soared under the Biden administration, we're looking at $3 trillion in cuts just in discretionary in this administration. That's one of the things, $3 trillion alone. You want to look at some of the other places that we can claw back money. COVID-19 is over. It's been over. It took Joe Biden a little longer to figure that out. He actually made an announcement that COVID-19 is over. But when you look at that, you'd say, hey, we're no longer buying plexiglass. We're no longer buying masks or gowns or these other things that need to be put in place. There's billions of dollars to claw back from unspent COVID-19 dollars, quote unquote, unspent COVID-19 dollars. Those get to get clawed back, or they should be clawed back. Joe Biden is not interested in that. We are demanding that take place. You look on top of that, the student loan bailout. This was something that Joe Biden decided he didn't need to put through the House of Representatives, didn't need to put through the Senate. When we do spending here, you're always looking for $1 of offset for $1 of spending somewhere else. They didn't look to do any of that. They just said $500 billion to bail out commitments that other people made to pay student loans. And they're just going to go and pay those on the backs of every American taxpayer. That's not okay. There's another $500 billion to claw back and say that's not going to take place. We've dealt already in part with repealing 87,000 new IRS workers. We know this is something, again, Joe Biden said they want 87,000 new IRS workers. They did it in the last Congress. Nancy Pelosi worked on this. We're saying we don't need 87,000 new IRS workers, more than doubling their current force, not out there to work to get the American people a faster refund, but going out there to actually get more money out of your pocket. That's the opposite direction of what we work. Since we were working on tax cuts before, we work in two different directions, Republicans and Democrats. So we want to see that repealed. That was the first bill that we did as the new Congress. We passed that. It was a strictly partisan bill, Republicans on one side, Democrats on the other. And as you could have guessed, of course, Democrats aren't going to take that up in the Senate. Chuck Schumer's not going to take up the repeal of 87,000 IRS workers in the Senate. Joe Biden's not going to take that up if it got to his desk, because they're not interested in doing that. If they were interested in it, they would have just not done it to begin with. So this is that point of leverage to say, hey, if you want to get this done, No 87,000 new IRS workers. You're going to take up the bill that we put forward at the beginning of this Congress. That's another example. And the list goes on and on. We recently passed H.R. 1, which is to lower energy costs. Again, basically the opposite direction of what the Biden administration is doing. If you want to grow the American economy, you have to grow American energy from sea to shining sea. And if you don't do that, you cannot grow our economy now or in the future. And what is the Biden administration doing? Their policies are working towards the exact opposite of that. We're saying we have this HR 1 that we passed. You're not looking to take it up. If you want to do anything with debt limit, you have to take that up, because we can't deal with America's debt and deficit without growing the economy, and growing the economy will not take place without you changing the direction that you are moving with American energy. And every American, every single one of us, has felt that in our pocketbook, whether it's when we go to the gas station and we're filling up with fuel, or whether it's we're buying things in the grocery store because they got moved by a truck that had fuel in it in order to get it to the grocery store or whatever store it was that we were shopping at. And those are some of the things that we're working on in that. So again, if you have questions, ask your questions. We'll look forward to getting to them. I'm going to cover one other issue before we get to the questions. That was a hearing that we had yesterday with the United States Coast Guard Commandant Admiral Fagan. She was here on Capitol Hill speaking to one of the subcommittees that I sit on, the Coast Guard subcommittee. I took that opportunity to talk to her about Brightline, a conversation that I would say I could not have been more disappointed with. I feel like the Coast Guard has been entirely dishonest with the Treasure Coast community about what they're doing with the Brightline train and their writing of a schedule for the train tracks going over the St. Lucie waterway that concern 32 Brightline trains a day and on average 15 freight trains a day going over that one bridge. They're looking at a 15-hour time frame, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. So basically a larger block than business hours, but that's the window of these trains. And with the amount of time that it takes, about 18 to 20 minutes to move this train bridge from down to up to, or from up to down to back up, that taking 18 to 20 minutes, they're looking at closing off the waterway, possibly 13 to 15 hours, 14 out of 15 hours, somewhere in that window. And that's not equitable. And we'll do a video on this in a minute. But just to summarize what took place, I asked the Coast Guard Commandant, the Admiral, numerous times, can you just acknowledge that this is not equitable? It's not equitable if you gave everybody local to the community that lives there, that pays taxes there, that chose to buy a home there, has a business there, you name it. If you gave them only 1 hour out of 15 hours of access, would you say that that is not equitable? She refused to answer, refused to talk about, ma'am, what if you only gave them 2 hours out of 15 hours and you gave the trains 13 hours out of 15 hours? Refused to acknowledge what is not equitable, what any person with a shred of common sense would say, no, listen, that's not equitable in any situation, certainly not to that community. She refused to. And I could give you a host of other examples of where the Coast Guard has been entirely dishonest with the community. The community has to stand up, fight, make your voice heard with the United States Coast Guard. I'm going to give one other quick example of what they did. Y'all remember last summer when there was a display of boats out on the water because people knew that the Coast Guard Admiral was coming in there to take a look at the waterway, and the Coast Guard threatened our community. They said, listen, if boats come out there, when the Admiral's out there, when the Miami sector Admiral is out there, then we're going to ticket them or cite them or do something else. What were they doing? The Coast Guard, who is tasked with supporting and defending the Constitution, were very literally threatening to take away the First Amendment right of people in our community to petition the government, to air their grievances, and to fine them if they came out for doing so because their community is on the precipice of getting screwed by the United States Coast Guard. They were threatening to fine people and take away your First Amendment right. That's where they're at on this. So in that, let's go to some questions. Again, as always, like, subscribe so you know when we're doing these things. And then let's answer some questions. I'll look for one on the bottom part of the screen here. And you guys give me one. And Jinwook always operates this. This is from Randy. Randy says, we just finished turning over our private information to an incompetent and oversized IRS. 100%. tax day needs to end, and we must replace federal income taxes with HR 25, the fair tax, national sales tax. And why are you not yet a co-sponsor? I'm almost positive that I've co-sponsored this in previous Congresses. Anytime that there is a new Congress, there is a new introduction of each and every bill, even though it existed in the last Congress. I want to say that tax amount, if I remember correctly, is I want to say that it's a flat 23% across the board. I think there's a number of approaches to reforming tax. I worked on the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in the first Congress that I was a part of, was very proud of that work that we did to cut taxes, bring dollars back from overseas, working with President Trump to do that. It was great work, lowering the tax amounts in every single income bracket, raising the standard deduction for single, for married, filing jointly, you name it. It was an awesome piece of legislation, and we did a lot of good work with that. I will continue to look at the fair tax, and in that's a commitment that I'll make to you. I'll continue to look at the fair tax. I'll bring it back up on my radar, see where I am with the co-sponsorship of that, and see where it's at in terms of moving in the House of Representatives. Happy to do that, Randy. What else you got, Jinwook? All right, what's going on with the World Health Organization and American sovereignty? The World Health Organization oversteps their bounds constantly. I feel like the United States of America should not be giving them $1 of your money. I always ask kids this when I have them in my office. I say, hey, how many government dollars are there? And you always get this array of answers from the kids. Oh, there's $1 trillion government dollars, or there's $1 billion, or there's this amount. And the answer is there are no government dollars. It's all your money. And not one penny of your money should be going to the World Health Organization. They are a stooge for China. They cover up for China when it comes to COVID-19. They absolutely look to invade upon American sovereignty and be a globalist entity that controls health in the United States of America, as well as a number of other things. So I am woefully, wholly against supporting the World Health Organization, given what I've seen out of them. Sitting on the Foreign Affairs Committee, it is an entity that we deal with, and others. And so I will continue to do my work and my fight against funding related to them. And that's that. I wish I could tell you that everybody else was on that page. They're not. I'll give you just one quick thing. And again, if you guys have questions, y'all ask questions. We'll try to get to those that I've been working on as it relates to grants going to non-government organizations, NGOs, foreign countries, things like that. Again, it's all your money. And you've seen some of the terrible grants out there, many of them, but one of the ones that sticks out in my mind, I want to say it was for drag shows in Ecuador. Your tax dollars going to fund drag shows in Ecuador. Now, you really have to ask yourself, what foreign policy are we trying to support? What American policy are we trying to support in a foreign country that we're paying for drag shows in another country? And here's how this ties into the World Health Organization and funding there. In my opinion, right now, the administration, they take dollars that go to the Department of State and they dole those dollars out however they want. Congress needs oversight of this. And I have legislation that says, just like any foreign military sales comes before Congress, and we get the opportunity to basically say, hey, we want to veto that. We want to prevent that sale from taking place because we're worried about that country or that entity or you name it. That should be taking place with any grant relating to any $1 that is your money going anywhere else. We should have the opportunity to veto each and every one of those things so that you don't have, as an example, that bad funding going to the World Health Organization or that bad funding going to drag shows in Ecuador or anything else. So there's a couple of examples on that. Jim, let's go to another question. And so how much time do you spend in Washington, D.C.? Do you stay for days, weeks at a time? While I'm doing this, I got Anne-Marie in the office. Anne-Marie, in my top drawer there, I actually have a congressional schedule. Maybe you could grab me the congressional schedule. I can give you some more exact time in that. There's not an exact rhyme or reason. It's not like the state house or the state senate where they're there for a straight couple of months and then not necessarily there for largely the rest of the year. We go where it's Monday to Thursday or Monday to Friday or Tuesday to Friday, or usually not over Saturdays and Sundays, but depending on what's going on, maybe you are here Saturday and Sunday if you have something you're dealing with like debt limit or funding of the government in some specific place that is very timely because people in the United States Coast Guard aren't getting paid or something else like that. So let's look at the month of May. Upcoming in the month of May, I'm in Washington, D.C. Basically 3 out of the 4 weeks in the month of May. In the month of June, basically in Washington, D.C., 3 out of the 4 weeks. In the month of July, in Washington, D.C., basically 3 out of the 4 weeks. Home for the weekends largely. So, tell folks I'm gavel to gavel here. When that gavel goes down, I am on the first flight that I can get back to South Florida, back to our home. And when the gavel goes down to be here, I'm making sure that I'm here before votes at 6 p.m. on Monday. And then I sit on the Foreign Affairs Committee. So there's travel to other places around the globe related to oversight of the withdrawal of Afghanistan, or your dollars that have gone to the Ukraine, which I have not voted to send your dollars to the Ukraine, but your dollars have still gone there because of other votes that have taken place for that people have voted on that. But going to do oversight over those weapons systems in Ukraine and things like that your dollars have sent over there, or what's going on with various NATO countries or Gulf countries, and what we're doing with energy policy. You name it, there is travel for the Foreign Affairs Committee. And there's travel constantly around our district and our community as I'm home over the weekends, but that's a little bit on that. So in that, I think we got time for one more question. I hear some sirens. It's a beautiful day here in Washington and the windows are open. So I apologize if you hear the sirens coming in from outside, but we had the windows open here. But I think we got time for one more question before I got to go do some votes. And in that, it's up here right now. So here's the question. Whose decision is it to keep federal and state buildings under COVID protocols, i.e. limited appointments, 6 feet distance, and masks? I just left the IRS building and the office is not open to the public. That is absolute garbage. Our offices are open to you all. Let me make a point on the IRS right here for you. Number one, man. Reach out to our office. We're taking your information. We're going to make sure that we get in contact with you. I always tell folks, if you don't like that it took you more than one ring on the phone to get in contact with the IRS or any other government agency, then let us give you our assistance. Give us a chance to go to work for you, and we will work to set up a time to get you on the phone with the IRS, or get you in our office where you don't have to wear a mask, and get the IRS people into our office. You can see the numbers that we put up there. Doesn't matter which office you call, whether you call Washington, D.C., or whether you call something down in Florida, you're going to get the same level of assistance. We'll get you to the right place. The Biden administration still has people working from home. Absolutely idiotic and ridiculous. The Biden administration still has requirements of people wearing masks in these buildings. Ridiculous. And we've done a number of things in legislation to prevent the Biden administration from doing that. But again, this goes, and this is the shadow that every common sense piece of legislation that we move through the House of Representatives falls under. It's common sense. We all know that it shouldn't be taking place. We're telling the Biden administration not to do it. They could just not do it if they chose to. So what they choose instead is not to take up our legislation. Chuck Schumer in the Senate, not looking to move policy to say you don't have to wear a mask because COVID is over and whatever he thinks. They're not going to take up legislation to say, hey, secure the southern border. They're not going to take up legislation like we were working on to say, hey, listen, you're not going to have men playing in women's sports. I spoke about that on the floor of the House of Representatives today, and saying simply this: it's cheating. It's cheating when men play in women's sports. If it wasn't cheating, why do we have rules against doping or steroids in sports? Why do we have referees and umpires and line judges and things like that? And it's to prevent cheating, to have fair play. But if the Biden administration was interested in taking that up as an issue, they would have done so, but instead they work in the other direction. So long story short, reach out to our office. We will assist you with the IRS. We will do everything that we can to help you on that front. I'll make one other quick point, because this is what we're debating in Washington, D.C. This issue of transgender in general, of men and women's sports, of the whole DEI argument that's going on in each and every agency in the U.S. government and in the military. It is weakening the United States of America. It is making us a laughing stock to other countries because we can't agree on something that's so obvious and clear to everybody, that a man is a man and a woman is a woman. And while any man or any woman can pretend to be whatever they want, it doesn't make it true. and they don't get to require that the rest of us play their charade. They don't get to. I was on the floor of the House today, and they were saying, oh, you're a bigot because you don't want to acknowledge that a man pretending to be a woman is a woman. That's because they're not. And I wanted to ask a question on the floor of House of Representatives, but my time ended. But I would have asked this question to any straight man sitting on the floor of the House of Representatives, of which there were a few. I don't think everybody down there was a straight man, but I would have said this to them had I had a little more time. I would have said simply this. What straight man on the floor of the House of Representatives in that moment would date a man pretending to be a woman? And I'll bet the answer from every straight man there would have been none of them. Why? Because they're not women. That's the simple answer. So the fact that we're having to have this argument is ridiculous. The fact that they're moving policy in our federal agencies and the military on this is ridiculous. And in that, as always, it is an honor to represent you. I always look forward to answering your questions. And I look forward to seeing you all around home. And I look forward to doing the next one of these and answering some more questions for you. I wish you all the best. You all take care.
Nobody asked.
But I wanted to say.